pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our special presentations. Tonight we have a presentation on discussion of space concerns and possible lease of St. Mary's Prep building.
Okay, so it's definitely something that we've been talking about for a while, and I figured let's put it out there at the top of the agenda in case some people are here to hear about that. I'm assuming that's why you're here. Am I right?
Somewhat.
Excellent. So last week I gave a presentation on some of our space challenges throughout the district, and the fact that our district has been grappling with space issues for years. As a matter of fact, the last school year, 18-19, was the first year in which we haven't had substandard space throughout the district in about 20 years. Substandard spaces are things like trailers, using hallways, using closets, things like that aren't meant for instructional space. Our district did decline in enrollment for a little while, but now it's going back up. That coupled with the changes in some of the things that we've done over the years in programming. For example, we went from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten. That stressed our buildings. We went from 2 pre-Ks to 4 pre-Ks, and we've had some additional special education programs and things like that throughout the district. So our space concerns are legitimate concerns. As a matter of fact, this year, going back this year, even though we only had one good year without any substandard space or room changes, we did have to take the music room at Riverview and use it for a classroom. So the music program doesn't have its own room. That's not the worst thing that can happen. But when you start having it where the art room doesn't have one, there's no science room and those things, this is where we think we're headed. We had our largest kindergarten class in the district in over 10 years this year. And there are two developments that have been approved, haven't started construction, but they've been approved. One is near Zeke Field, about 65 units rentals. The other one is near Morris Knolls, in the woods to the left of Morris Knolls, if you're looking at the driveway. And that's about 115 2- and 3-bedroom units, so that one will bring students into our district. We have been toying with the idea for years about building and going out for a referendum. We talked about a referendum just about a year ago, 2 years ago, when we did Plan 3. Plan 3 was the way that we reassigned some space in our libraries in all 3 schools, created some instructional space. We were able to eliminate the trailers. So we have space issues, we have space concerns, and we have some solutions. One of the solutions is to build a new school. There's really no support for that, including from me. We have some property on the south side of town on Cole Drive, about 30 acres. The board did look into doing that several years ago and abandoned the idea. The second option, you could always add on the Lakeview, but we didn't consider that an option because it's already a large school. So really the second option was to build an addition on Riverview, which would cost approximately $10 million. Riverview's in a floodplain. There's a lot of issues with Riverview. It'd have to be built in the back, actually, on pillars. You'd have like a spot where you could go underneath and you could drive underneath that would be open, and then there'd be a 2-story addition over it. So we had some conceptual plans drawn up for that. In the same time, though, the school across the street, St. Mary's Prep, closed as of June. It seemed like a legitimate way to pick up some space without putting out so much money. Oh, I also like to backtrack that. This board and myself, the administration, spent several years eliminating our debt. We are debt-free. Our district has no debt from bonds, and we're one of the only ones that doesn't. And we like that. It's a positive thing. So to take on more debt isn't something that we're all really jumping at right now. So we have this situation across the street, and we have to live with a 2% cap. There's a lot of things that we have to do with that. We would have to increase our budget, our recurring cost of our budget, because this would be a recurring cost between the lease and the staffing, you'd have to increase our budget to be able to cover that. Now, our 2% cap is around $600,000. There's a state law that says that you have to keep your district budget within a 2% tax levy cap. So it's not a budget cap, it's on the tax levy. So if your budget's 30 million and your tax levy is 28 million, your 2% is on the 28, not on the 30. So we have to keep it within a 2% cap. There's a lot of other things that go with that, but there are ways around the 2% cap, depending on different things that could happen. Like we have a banked cap. The state allows you, if you have the ability to raise the budget, but you don't do it, you can bank it for 3 years and then you can do it another time. We also would probably get some waivers because of our sizes of the population growth. When you have a population growth, you can get a waiver. And we're also receiving more state aid with the changes to the School Funding Reform Act that was passed in 2018. It's called Senate 2. It's an excellent thing for Denville. Not a good thing for some other districts, but for us it's great. We get around $122,000 a year more for 7 years. We've only got it for 2 years. I don't know if it'll actually pan out to be all 7, but they said it'll be 7 years. So the least details are not finalized. I feel very confident now, after my meeting today, that we could proceed with this. So the other details, for example, where would my child have music? You know, we're not sure about all that, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I also asked the administrators to think about what could you do with the space. Like, there's a lot of different things we can do. We first talked about, and remember, I got to look at a 2% cap, so increasing certain things is difficult because our budget, like our salaries and things, they all go up. You know, the cost of all the other things go up, so we have to live within this 2% cap. So we looked at a bunch of things. One of them was to make it a central K-5, pre-K-K. So the entire district, all the kids in pre-K and kindergarten would go to St. Mary's. We looked at that, we investigated it, and by the way, we also had our architect come out. So the downside of it, there was 2 very large downsides to doing that, even though educationally we liked it, but it was about $750,000 just to build the bathrooms that you need for pre-K and K. The other thing that was even more difficult, because we have funds for that in a different line, but our recurring costs are difficult. The thing that was worse than that is that we would have to have another tier of busing, which would cost us approximately $200,000 to $250,000 on top of all the other things I was just talking about, like the lease costs. So we eliminated that as an option because we literally couldn't do it. We'd have to go to the public for what's called a second question. The second question is an odd thing because there is no first question. It used to be a first question and a second question. For some reason, they still call it a second question. So we'd have to go to the public for a second question. Negative side of the second question is we wouldn't be ready for this November. We wouldn't even be able to do it until next November, meaning we wouldn't be able to even think about planning something until the following year. Another thing is if you go to the public for a second question and the public votes no, you can't do it no matter what. So you can't say, well, we're going to move this money around. You just can't do it. You're done. So we talked about the pre-K. Another thing we looked at was starting a small K-5 school, like just 2 sections each. We kind of ruled that out. We weren't crazy about that it would just be a small number of kids in there. And it also would have caused additional busing, and it would be a new school. That's an issue. We have to create a 4th school, which we don't have. We only have 3. So, Dr. Cullis, those are our... Oh, we also thought about Central 5, moving all the 5th graders to St. Mary's. It was another grade we looked at. There were some downsides to that too. We didn't think we could do it all with the busing. We felt like the transitions was another area where we weren't really crazy about having the kids all go to school for 1 year, then back to the middle school. Like you're only in the school for 1 year. We weren't totally opposed to it, but we felt like it wasn't the best option. In the end, with the discussion with everybody, we felt like the best option is to make St. Mary's and Riverview one school, like with 2 different buildings on 1 campus, but it's one school. It's not an additional school. So we have a lot of details to talk about. What our plan is, just so everybody knows, this is really important. We would not have on the agenda for approval anything to do with this in terms of moving forward at least until October 28th. That would be the first possible day that the board would have to vote on this lease. In the interim, between today and the date of the vote, there'll be two board meetings, including the date of the vote, where the public can come and share their concerns. But there will also be 2 information sessions. The first one will be at the Riverview PTA meeting. I think that's October 16th. Actually, I have it written down somewhere. And then our second one will be, that's at night. I wanted to do a day one for people who couldn't come to the night one. So we're going to do another one the following Wednesday, right here in Town Hall, and that'll be at 1 p.m. So we're going to have 2 public information sessions. At that time, we'll have more information, like some more details, maybe not every single thing yet, but we'll have more details, like where would the bus drop-off be? What would we do with the, what would we do with music? What would we do with art? Things like that. Will there be security? Things, all those different questions we'll have answers to. So I think the biggest takeaway for everybody is this is still a work in progress of the discussion. We have not finalized the lease, so we're not 100%, this is not 100% certain. And even if we did have a finalized lease, the way we decided to go about it was to take 2 months to talk about it publicly. The entire month of September. We actually started this back in July and June, but we've been ramping it up since August. In August, I did a presentation. Now we're talking about a little bit more of the details. Next month, we're going to have a lot more of the details, and then the final decision wouldn't be made at the earliest until October 28th. That date could move to a later date, but it won't move to an earlier date. So if people have concerns and they don't think it's a great idea, or whatever the reason is, there's plenty of time to make your concerns known. And in the interim, get some of your questions answered as to what it would look like. One thing that we don't want to do here is go back to trailers. It took us way too long to get rid of them. I don't want to do it again, and they cost about $1 million. So we don't want to spend money on trailers. This lease is kind of recession-proof too. If the building doesn't happen, if we don't have a big increase 5 years from now, we can get out of the lease. Whereas if you go build something and spend $10 million, the public's going to be left with that debt for a long time to pay off something you don't really need. Another thing that's positive too, in my mind, is this could be a bridge to something else. Like say all this building and then more happens and we need something to do something else. This could be a bridge that gets us through the time where we're going to build something so that we're not using trailers or any temporary solutions. We have another place that's a safe building for kids to be. I also feel like it's important to note that maybe, again, we use demographers, but it's all kind of, it's not like there's certainty. It's like the weather, right? Trust me, I'm the guy who has to deal with the weather all the time. I'm always dealing with the weather. That didn't snow, right? Well, it's kind of like the snow. We think there's going to be kids coming, but maybe there aren't. But maybe there's a lot more than we think. So down the road, if 3-4 years from now, the building projects are all done, and then there's more building projects on the road, and we need another school, or we need an addition on a school, this is a good bridge to get us to that point too, without having to use what not just me, but the state calls substandard space, like trailers, and hallways, and things like that. So, Mr. Anderson, that's my whole spiel here, and I put it here so if anybody wants a discussion, just a discussion, that's what I call it, discussion, like we normally do, doing it around, when we do things around the presentation. I'm good with it, if everybody else is good with it. So.
Thanks, Mr. Forte. I'll add a few comments just from my time on the board. I'll open up to the board kind of comments or questions, and then we'll open up for public comments or questions. So I've been on the board since January 2015, I believe, and I can tell you we've discussed facility concerns since I've been here, whether it's substandard space, whether it's not enough bathrooms. The interesting part is even when I came on the board, the enrollment in our district was lower. However, the space concerns existed because of the way we use our space now versus the way we used it 10, 15, 20 years ago. Meaning that we have a lot higher demand for smaller spaces, which our buildings weren't set up for. So we spent a lot of time, instead of putting up a curtain in the middle of a room and separating a room, actually building a wall. You'll see that a lot of the media centers or what they used to be libraries in all the district. So we spent a lot of time getting our facilities set up the way that would be appropriate for our students. I've sat through 3 demographer reports by at least 2 different demographers. Their role, and it's required by the state for them to present to us on their estimates on what they project our enrollment to be, as well as what they project the enrollment to be each year going through K through 8th grade. From sitting through all of them, what I can tell you is they're really good at figuring out if you've got 100 kids coming in for kindergarten, how many you're going to have first, second, third, fourth, all the way up to 8th. They're really good at figuring that out. Those don't vary very much. What is really hard to do, like Mr. Forte talked about, was predicting the weather, is same analogy on demographers. They're using some past data to predict future enrollment. They've all severely underestimated every single year I've seen. For 10 years I've seen all the demographers. The ironic part is that years ago they severely underestimated. So it's extremely hard for us to predict and to determine what we think is going to happen. However, the benefit of this board is that we all live in this town. A lot of us have young kids, or we've been in the town for a long time, and we've seen cyclical populations come and go. And what the feeling of the board is that this is not going to decrease in enrollment. We see more young families coming into Denville. We see you get listed on New Jersey's top places to live. It's a phenomenal place to live and raise a family, and people are seeing that, and because of that, they're coming to Denville. So with that, we've presented these concerns, gosh, for years now. Strategic planning, when we had, how many people were at the strategic planning? Over 100 people from the public. Steve presented and literally presented the idea of additions at Riverview, Lakeview. We didn't have St. Mary's as a possibility. We've looked into options. There was some discussion on Morris County Vocational School. They potentially might be looking at a different property. That's not what they're doing now, but they did for a short time. We talked to them proactively. We've talked to the town. In addition to some of the other things that are going on, the Affordable Housing Act has, there's been a boom on high-density housing in towns like Denville, and approval, like Steve said, for at least 2 developments that have not been built but have been at least approved, I believe, at the planning board stage, although don't quote me. But they've certainly been rezoned properties that you can put high-density housing in where there used to be single-family zoned housing. We have presented at the town council meetings expressing our concerns over high-density housing coming and the amount of students that would come out of there. We've had our demographer do some projections on that. We've only had one in the recent past, which is Esseling Lake, right, the commuter village. The good news on that one, they were 1 and 2 bedroom, although we did get students out of it. So we've got some projections on what we expect to get out of the 2 approved, as well as at least 1 more that's in initial planning stages. So with the population growth, because it's a really great place to raise your kids, with the population growth because we're talking about more affordable housing and high density housing within the town. My feeling is that we're going to continue to see growth, so what do we do? I would say that in some ways, St. Mary's, I can tell you, my personal feeling is I'm upset that St. Mary's closed. I think it was a phenomenal asset to the community, and it's always good to have a school like that in the town. However, from a board perspective, purely just based upon space, it's a little bit of a gift being handed to us because we're at a point where we kind of need space, and the options are limited. I think we need to take advantage of it. I think that hopefully we need to determine, we've had a lot of discussion on the board as to how that plays out. Mr. Forte talked about a few of those options. These discussions have gone on intensely for months now. It's not something that we take lightly and not something we just say, Steve, figure it out. It's really a group discussion. They come with some great ideas. Dr. Collis has really talked to us about what does it mean educationally for the students. We've talked about the social emotional learning that we've really put into the district and how important that is. So all these things are discussion points that we've had discussions on. And the biggest thing we can ask for is for the public to come and talk to us about how they feel, because your students and your kids are going to be in these schools. So hopefully we can hear a little bit from you. But that's just a little bit about kind of my personal 1 of 7 on this board, my feelings on St. Mary's and the space concerns we have. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or discussion from the board.
Personally, I think you would be involved, and if you don't mind, I'd like to reserve comments until.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Anybody have anything before?
I would just like to encourage everyone in the public, not just the people who are here, but the people who are listening to this on YouTube. If you have any ideas, comments, or suggestions, please get on the phone, get on your email, send them in. We aren't sure that we've got the best idea here. There might be a better one out there.
With that, I will open I'm going to open up the public discussion. It's not on our agenda, but I'm going to open up our public discussion at 7:56. We'll take any comments or questions with regards to anything germane to the district. If you want to make a comment, if I could just ask you to come up to the microphone,
Sure.
state your name and address for the record, sign in,
Okay.
and your comments will be, just so
Recorded.
you know, recorded on YouTube, so you can go back and view them
I saw
at
lots
your
of
leisure.
stuff. We're good.
Can the board use
Hi.
microphones? Because it was difficult to hear
Sure, sorry.
the
Turn
audio.
Yeah, turn up Morgan, sorry about that. And then do we have a microphone for, no, public, sorry.
Hi, Nancy.
The microphone helps to pick up on it.
Hi, I'm Nancy. How are you? This is the first time I was speaking before board, and I think St. Mary's sounds like a great idea. I love it. I'm all on board for everything. I know space is an issue. My oldest order was some trailers. I hated it. No security, very dangerous. Didn't like it at all. So I love the St. Mary's idea. I do. However, the space issue, I have a personal issue with is I have a first grader that his class is just like, it's 23 kids, it's in Riverview, 25 kids in Downton, 24 kids in, some more first graders here, 24 kids in Agnes class. Thank you. It just seems, it's just overwhelming, and I hope that you'll reevaluate the spread over Riverview, all the classroom sizes, if you do St. Mary's, and add staff possibly to the first grade class, because it's overwhelming. I mean, Downton has no aid, and she has 25 kids. My son's not in Downton's class, my son is in the Smyrn's class, and he has 23, and he does have an aide with him, and I'm thankful for that. But it just seems overwhelming. There's such little kids, and it's a lot of teachers. So that's pretty much all I needed to say. I think St. Mary's is great. I've been in the school district for many years. I have a junior in high school, and I have a sixth grader, and I have a first grader. And I love the district. You guys are doing a great job, and I hope it goes through at St. Mary's. And that pretty much first grade is what I wanted to talk to you about, and how we're going to reevaluate all the classrooms in it, not just kindergarten and second that were added teachers. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you don't mind, I'm leaving because I have 6 grade.
Not at all. Thank you for your comments.
Morgan,
Steve, do you want to,
can you make sure the microphone's on?
actually, Dr. Claus, do you want to talk, if you want to wait 1 second,
Oh, yeah.
only because Dr. Claus can talk a little about the flex zone and
Oh,
the
sure.
distribution.
I can just tell you that the goal moving into St. Mary's would be that we have 4 sections of every grade level.
What do we have right now?
Well, we have already 4 kindergarten and 4 second, so that would be set unless more students move in, and then we would have to look at if we were going to find a review. But that would be, our rolling up would be 1st, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. You know, we would be looking at the teachers, and all sections would be 4 sections instead of 3, because we would be moving slowly some students over so that we can have 4 sections at Riverview for
For each class. Okay.
One of the challenges just overall has been, you know, how do you balance the Lakeview kindergarten, you know, kindergarten's where you start, right?
Yeah.
And usually they kind of, the growth from kindergarten first and second and all that is usually pretty equal, Lakeview and Riverview. But how do you get those classes so they're pretty close to the same, and what's that balance? One of the challenges we had was when I started on the board, we had a line, and it was like, okay, if you live on this side of the line, you're on Riverview. If you live on that side, you're on Lakeview. So when Steve and Dr. Cullis came in, they created a flex zone. So there's a zone that is a few blocks either direction where you may go to Riverview or Lakeview. Only your kindergarten year. Once you're in kindergarten, that's where you're going to stay. You're not going to switch schools every year. But the goal is to balance out those class sizes at the kindergarten level so that, you know, we've got even classrooms. Because at one point we were having, and I can't remember which school it was, one of them had lower
Lakeview
and
is
one
20
higher.
right, Lakeview consistently got 25 per class, and Riverview was having 16, so.
So the downside is it's hard when you're in that flex zone, but we try to do the best we can to try to accommodate. And if you have a sibling and all that, we take that into account. But that's one of the ways we try to balance
I
it.
think that's what happened with his class. The flex zone went to Riverview. So, and that's why I feel that that might be the issue with the first grade situation that I'm having. So, I just hope you can
We still have
reevaluate.
5 full sections at Lakeview as well, but.
They do, but they're a lot less. They're like 18 or, I forget. You guys, what did I say? 19, 18, 19. They're less than what Riverview is. I did my homework, so I have.
One thing I just want to make sure that you're clear on, the doctor's call said we're going to do 4 sections, not in the first year. It'd be something that would be phased in.
Right.
It's not
I'm
something that would happen
unseating
immediately.
kids,
Right, so not next year.
We're not planning on unseating any kids, meaning like if you're already at Lakeview, we're not going to pull you out.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't expecting that to happen.
So it would start next year with kindergarten. We would plan on moving some kids from Lakeview to Riverview and have a 4th kindergarten at Riverview.
Okay,
And then slowly it would grow. Now, we'll always reevaluate. That's why we reevaluated the current 2nd grade at Riverview. So it's something that we'll always reevaluate. And we'll have some space too.
right, well, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping the space will also alleviate possible, like, this first grade situation. I mean, it's 11, 12 kids over. Like, I consider a normal classroom size 20. I don't know what you consider it, but to me, 20 is a lot. And to me, it seems like a max for a teacher to handle, like, well. So, and I feel like anything over that is a lot for them. It's a lot for them, it's a lot for the kids to get individual attention from the teacher too.
And I really do appreciate those comments. We do look very closely at that, and I just want the public to be really aware that we do not have more than 18 to 19 in any core instructional time in the classroom at that time. So although on paper it may sometimes look like that because kids can move in and out from different programs and attend, homeroom and parties and things, but during our core instructional time, the number is 18 and 19, and that's the same at Lakeview as well. And that's what we really look to make sure that during this
So
core
then
instructional time.
First grade in Riverview is 25, 20, that's on.
Sure, on paper it is,
Right,
on
on
paper it is,
paper.
but during your core classes, there is not. So if you ask the teacher, you ask the principal or anything, there is 18 to 19 during our core instructional time, which is social studies, science, math, and language arts.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, I
Appreciate
appreciate it.
it.
And we, we certainly look at that every year.
All right, I'll see you guys.
So, hi, I'm Michelle Salmon, and I live at 16 Lakeview. Not Lakeview, I'm not just at Lakeview, Lakewood Drive. So I wasn't actually coming about the first grade thing, but I actually had spoken to you, Mr. Forte, about the first grade size too, because I have a first grader in Riverview as well, and I'm a teacher as well in a neighboring town, and
I'm sorry, can you just grab the mic just so we record?
Sorry.
Thank you, appreciate it.
yeah, it's good. But I'm a teacher too in a neighboring town, and I do know that class size is huge. The most I've ever taught is 23, and that's with kids being pulled out. And that's a lot for a teacher, whether there's an aide there or not. The aide's there for the kids that need it, but it's just a lot. Separate from that, I really came to you had mentioned about that separate, that when you start a new school, that there's data that supports, or you start too many transitions, that there's data that supports that it has a negative impact on the students. So I know we're talking about taking that and putting that into a 4th, 5th grade school, but, and that's still Riverview, but to me, that's another big transition. And I feel like if I had a choice between Riverview and Lakeview, and one my kid stays kindergarten through 5th grade, and one my kid goes kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then they get pulled and do 4th and 5th elsewhere, I'd much rather be at Lakeview. That keeps it all together. So, I know also you guys have talked about the kindergarten being there and adding in the extra bathrooms, or there being an addition onto Lakeview. And I know the price you said, I think for bathrooms was like $750,000, but then busing was another issue. And at Lakeview, I forget what the price, but maybe you said it was like $7 million to add on. I don't
We had
remember.
8 million
8
down
million.
because that was the numbers we had.
And then I forget the exact amount you said that it increases per year for the taxes. But when, and I don't know if I was doing my numbers right, but I felt like that came maybe down to like $20 per month per average household. And to me, that's nothing for my taxes. You're gonna throw another $20 on a month. When you say it's a big number, yeah, that's a lot. And I know there's a man here last time who said, like, I'm already paying $20,000 in taxes. I mean, that's not most people's taxes in Denville. And yes, I know that with some people that's a lot. But throw another $20 on there, yet you solved the space issue. I mean, that seems huge to me. So I really liked the idea. And the only reason I do the Lakeview bigger than the Riverview is I know the Riverview price is higher. But I kind of like to see that broken down per month. Because I know one time too at my school where I'm teaching that this was before they had the 2% cap, we had a vote, and our school budget failed, which never happens. And that we came up and we said these are the solutions, and really it came down to like, are you willing to pay $8 more a month? And we can have busing, free busing, and all these things that really when it gets broken down, sometimes it's not that big of a difference. Even though the price may sound huge. And then I also had questions too about, I know there's the additional housing you guys are talking about coming in. Is that also additional tax dollars too though that get thrown in? Not that I love the idea of major housing, but if that's extra, yeah, there might be some more kids, but maybe that's also extra school budget money too, I don't know. And then, going back to St. Mary's too, a lot of my concerns are the reasons I don't love it for the 4th, 5th grade. Again, I don't like that split, like K-3, okay, here you're 4 or 5. And then not having administration in that office. I know you talked about having like, a teacher that has a supervisor type thing being there. It's just it's a different feel. I noticed that what if in the winter they're crossing back over there from assemblies or gym. Just everything about it makes me go, ugh. I see it as a detriment to the town and to the school. That doesn't mean I love the huge class sizes either, so I understand the space issue. But if it comes down to, not much money per month per household, I think other solutions that are out there, such as adding on to Lakeview, or making a kindergarten for everybody then. At least everyone is dealing with the same impact. I don't think I have anything else. I have to do this all together. And then I guess, my other thing would be, what's the board's second option too? I don't also love just, okay, we're really feeling like we should go to St. Mary's and this is our limited time to go there. Well, what are the 2 options? Maybe that are coming out, this is option number 1, this is option number 2, and listing the pros and cons of both gives everybody a little bit more of a decision to make versus just, oh, that's my only hope, either I take it or I don't. Well, here are 2 of my hopes, what do I like? So, those are my thoughts, and thank you guys very much.
Thank you for your comments, and I'll address a couple real quick, and if you wouldn't mind. So you mentioned about the additional housing and the tax money that comes in,
Yeah.
so it's a good question. We're still under the 2% cap, so if that theoretically, which it won't, let's say it added 10% to the tax base, we can still only access 2%. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't really add to what we can. that's number one. And number two, typically additional housing, especially with high-density housing, typically the amount you collect in taxes, just overall, I'm not just talking for schools, but I'm talking generally for town and county, usually the cost that you have to increase schools and policing and DPW, all the services, typically does not equate to it being a positive financial, it usually is negative financially, usually. But it will not add, we still have a 2% cap, we can still go up 2%, we can't go up any more, we can't go up, we can go less, but we can't go any more than that with the additional housing. The other thing that I wanted to mention that we didn't mention earlier was, you're right, we constantly look at pros and cons. One of the other cons, you mentioned about the $20 difference per year. It's a little bit, and I was trying to pull up Steve's presentation, so sorry I was looking at my laptop. I believe part of that, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, when you presented, you showed if we went to St. Mary's, but that goes up to the 2% cap, right? In other words, we would still need to go to the 2% cap if we put an addition on, because we still have our other operating expenses that would go up, right? So that cost is gonna be our cost probably if we did St. Mary's or not, right?
I would think, like, in other words,
Close to it.
I think what we're trying to say is, because you're gonna build up more space, you're gonna need more custodians, more heat, more everything, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to fund that as well, just like you would if you had to do it across the street.
I guess the way I look at it is operational and capital, right? To build the building and then the operational cost to run the building. I think with St. Mary's, we don't have a significant capital expense. There is a little bit, but not much. We do some modifications to get the building up to what we would consider the standards that we expect in the rest of our buildings. But the operational expenses are probably pretty equal. So because of that, I think that the additional cost per year is probably closer to $50 or $60 per household for 30 years. That's one. Number two is the other piece to think about when you do construction is not just the cost, but the effect of, okay, how do you do this? You can't build a $10 million addition in the summer. So that means students are going to be in the school when you're doing construction. The detriment to, what do we do with that? How do we've even talked saying, okay, so let's say we rented St. Mary's. This is a theoretical, right? And growth, it's booming, like to the point that we're like, oh my gosh, we can't even fit in St. Mary's, we need more space. Or we say, listen, this is okay for now, but we want to look to put a permanent structure up. We could build a school, build an addition on one of our buildings, and use St. Mary's as let's put some more kids over there for that 1 year while we do construction. The construction process, Steve, so if we were to say today on September 16, 2019, that we want to go to referendum and we want to build an addition at Riverview, when would that addition be open? Ballpark, and I'm not putting your feet on the fire, sorry to call you out, but you would probably know the best at time.
I would say there's a year of planning, then a vote, which you have to put out, you have to promote that so that everybody understands the vote. By the time you do the vote, say you do November, well, you're not going to start construction the following summer, maybe. Like that would be tight, believe it or not. Schools go slow, there's all kinds of processes, procedures, engineers, architects involved. So from the time you decided, like right now, we just said, we're going to go to it, I would think the earliest would be about 3 years.
And I only say that to just give you an idea of what we look at to say pros and cons. So, I mean, I'm constantly sitting there going, okay, the pros of this, the cons, what are our options? And then the other downside Mr. Forte mentioned earlier is if we were to build, and we've looked at like not long-term past history of enrollment, and there is a little bit of cyclical, right? It still has a trajectory upward, but it's cyclical where you do have drops and peaks and valleys. One of my concerns sitting up here is, gosh, if I burden the taxpayers with a $10 million bond, which is obviously you add on your cost of the debt, and it costs more than that, and then we don't need that space, so we've got like classrooms empty. So, and these are just all the things that we talk about and we're thinking about, and none of them trump the one thing that I would say is, and I, by the way, I will say personally, I came into the last meeting saying, Mr. Forte, pre-KK is the way to go. I don't care if it costs $750,000. And then Dr. Cullis and Mr. Forte presented, and I said, okay. I said I'm more. I was kind of transitioned over because the educational impact that Dr. Cullis presented based upon how she felt as an educational leader, and Mr. Forte's presentation on a little bit more of the finances of it, particularly the busing, which was an issue, so. Did you have anything else you wanted to? Any other, I'm sorry, I want to make sure
There was one thing brought up about the administration. That little thing isn't really about the person running that building. There's a principal and a vice principal that would have to run both buildings. It's one campus, but we would add a third person that would be there if one of them happened to be absent or any other thing, just to have some kind of coverage.
So the principal or vice principal, one would be in one school, one would be in the other school?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then on that rare occasion when somebody's not there, it'd be plus we're right across the street too, and I would even, it would be, actually, I live 1 block away, I'd be a half block away, so maybe I'd do that. That block is getting long.
but thank you very much for your comments, appreciate it.
Can I ask one more? Sorry, I was
Sure.
talking about this too. So what is, and I know you kind of alluded to the fact that maybe there isn't a thought on that. So what is the thought with music time, gym time, assembly time? Is the thought, okay, guys, you cross the road and you head?
Right now, we're kind of up in the air. I'm letting the principal really get a team together to talk about that, what they think it would look like. I also think that maybe on some days they might want to do it. Like it's a nice day and you want to go over to the main campus, maybe you do it, maybe you don't. Maybe, sometimes we have recess in the back, sometimes they have it on the playground in the back too. I'm kind of letting her decide. I'm giving her the parameters and she can pretty much run with the way she thinks it would work best. And I also think that there's going to be some flexibility on, maybe there's like a certain project they want to do over at the main campus in the library, something like that.
And I like that idea too, but I guess I still feel like even if you're giving us this Theodoropoulos, like, okay, this is what you need to do, like, yeah, she's gonna find a way to make it work, but is it actually still good? I don't know.
Well,
Like, just because she found a way doesn't mean it's woohoo you.
let me just back up a minute, because this town, for years, really grappled with these problems. These are going back well before me, like you're talking about in the 80s, right? In the 80s, and I'd hate to say it, but they decided to sell a school for $1, right? And then later on in the late 90s, they decided to make a school that was already large, really large. And now we're kind of in that, this is what we're stuck with, right?
Yeah.
We could go down the road of an addition. I think a new school is a really big project, and there's a lot of DEP issues with our property up there. It's like swampland. It's 30 acres, but probably only 20 are really usable. So the answer to your question of what's Plan B, we don't have a great Plan B. Plan B is we'll have to use substandard space again, and we'd have to go out to the public for a referendum.
And the kindergarten isn't a plan B at all. Using it as a kindergarten pre-K space.
Oh, we plan to do like over there?
Yeah, well, I don't know, we're just,
Right.
yeah.
So problem with using that is the additional recurring cost of busing. So if I can only raise my budget by, like we've done some figures, we think we can raise the budget by $1,027,000 using every possible dollar that we have, right? But around 600,000 of it is already taken up by just increases that we normally have. So there's not a lot of other money. We're gonna have to pay a lease, we're gonna have to pay utilities, we're gonna have to pay for a custodian. Like there's some costs in there that we have to do. And you have to clean the building, you have to have a custodian in the building, there's certain things you have to do. We want another class 3 officer or some type of security because all the other buildings have that. So if you look at all those things, that's why I didn't bring that as a viable option, because the extra 250,000 makes it that we couldn't do it. Like if that was the only one we were gonna do, I probably would just abandon this idea.
Have you guys ever used, this is totally off topic, but my father was in the busing company with First Student, and I know he now works for a company that they actually consult schools about busing and how you can rework schedules and save money. Like, has there been a group like that that's looked at the busing schedule and said, hey, if you change this here and this here a little bit, I don't know, just as an idea.
We actually used a few companies to do that, and every year our routes are rated very highly by the state because we have to hand in this thing called DRTRS. I forget what it stands for, whatever it is. They go over how you're managing it. Now, another thing about our town is every kid gets a bus, no matter what. Even the kids on St. Mary's Place get bused to Riverview. So every kid gets a bus in our town. That's obviously an obstacle. to deal with, because it's a large, we have 30 buses, we don't even have enough bus drivers, so. We did look at what you said, like, are we efficient, is there a way we can eliminate some of it? And that's why we made some changes that some of the people probably were upset about, but we consolidated stops to make our buses a little more efficient on the timing. Because believe it or not, even though you might say, like, you know, you took out this one stop, it was right in front of my house, but when you add that up by 100 of them, you know, it starts to add, it makes time. Even those extra, like, goodbye kisses that the parents give their kid, it all adds up, it slows everything down. So we did what you said, and we're kind of we're at a point now where we all know that we have an issue, and I believe that all of us up at this table do not want to go down the substandard space route yet. It's been something that took so long to eliminate. It was just an opportunity that was there.
Yeah, and you mentioned about busing. I can tell you that sitting up here, I get more emails about consolidation of bus stops. I used to have a bus stop in front of my house, it's now 2 doors down. I mean, literally, I probably get 15 of those a year. And I think we do a pretty good job of not consolidating buses and offering it to everyone. And we've made a conscious decision as a board and as an administration to not eliminate courtesy busing and to do the best we can. And a lot of times, I mean, Steve will tell you, a lot of times when those announcements come out that the bus stops are out, it's like all the parents are happy. And I'm like, oh, here come the emails. Because, but, you know, I will tell you that there's people who are pretty passionate about transportation.
They look at, okay, well, just what I know about the busing thing is they look at a lot of things you might not think to look at, like even start times of school. There's more than just let's consolidate
And
bus stops.
a couple years ago, we looked at consolidating down, changing some times and consolidating down to 2 tiers of busing. And what was there, 1, 2, 3, 6 people? There was like 60 people in this room. Really, really angry that we were going to change around the times. And by the way, the time change was literally based upon Dr. Cullis bringing recommendations from the American Association of Pediatrics, and there was real data to show that it was going to benefit students, but it was going to affect extracurricular activities, and because it was going to affect a soccer game or a basketball game, it was like, you know, we had more people sitting in these seats complaining and upset that we were looking at that, and so it's tough sometimes sitting up here, but we try to be pretty objective and understand exactly what everybody's concerns are and understand, but it's transportation and bus times are pretty tough to move around. But I will tell you, I ask that question every year. Right? When I first started on the board, I was like, Steve, I was behind this bus. It looked like there was like 8 kids on it. Like, you know, can we consolidate it? They're looking at it all the time, trying to, especially with the shortage of bus drivers, it's even more scrutinized. So, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Comments?
How we doing? Chris Tights, 94 North Coconut Road. So I understand there's a lot of challenges at play here regarding the size of classrooms and operations. And I kind of, I spoke with my wife. We watched the previous meeting last time, and I kind of think about it, and kind of think about the operational side of it, and obviously then the financial cost of it. I think some of the operational, I know Dr. Cullis, you mentioned last time about the transitioning, and I want to kind of reiterate some of the what was said earlier. I have a serious concern about that, because as much as you mentioned that we don't want to do this jumbling and have people from different, the children going from one school to another school to a different school, we are basically creating that in this situation. I don't care what we call it as an annex or the secondary part of the campus, it's a separate school. And I have a real concern about this, especially with what the Riverview, the Riverview PTA, the families, and yourselves, and the teachers, and the administration over there really trying to nurture, which is to have this community. I mentioned this to my 3rd grader, and Matthew was upset about it, because he said, oh, I don't have to go upstairs. He was like really upset about it. And then he mentioned about how being part of that community when they come off the bus and they have the 4th and 5th graders actively, helping with the kindergartens. that is gonna be lost in this scenario. That interaction is not gonna be there, and I think that is a detriment to our community. I really think there is a price that you can pay on that, and I don't think $900,000 my estimate is one that, is worth it, especially on some of the social aspects. So I have some serious reservations on that front about what we've been trying to build here in Riverview and in the Denville school district itself. Just some of the operational considerations, I'm concerned that the board may be trying to make a decision, and I understand time is of the essence here, but without thoroughly thinking about all of the nuances. And I know there's a lot of people behind the works who are doing a lot of work here. But when you say, well, Mrs. Theodoropoulos just have to figure it out, we'll make it work. And again, is that the best approach? Did we really think this through? And, operation, I don't know, like Matthew asked me, he's like, how do we go to the playground? How do we go to lunch? And then there's safety considerations. There's no crosswalk here. Are they going all the way down to 46 across to the front door? I don't know these things, and that's a concern of mine when I have a child who will be going in 4th and 5th grade next year. And I also have kindergarten coming in next year. So I see a lot of different pieces to this. And I don't want to personalize it myself, because I know there's a lot of situations at play here. I think some of those things need to be answered before you make a decision on the, just some of the operations. One question I had, how many of the board members have been in that building? Great, thank you, I appreciate it, that's good to know. So, financially, I'm looking at it, and from the numbers, there's, it's $300,000 for the upkeep, which that concerns me that we are paying to invest in an asset that is not ours, that we have no control over. We could lose in 5 years, and our $300,000 gone. Where does that go? We don't own that asset, and we don't know what the diocese is going to do with that building. We don't know what they're going to do in the future. We have, I think what you mentioned last time was the max of 5-year lease that we're allowed legally to have. Is that correct?
It is, but you can have options too, so there would be 2 5-year options on the end.
So max would be 10, or 2 5 years on top of this would be a total of 15 that we'd be allowed up to. So that's thoughtful in terms of that. But I did have a concern with the leases. Is that our option? Is that going to be the diocese option to renew that after 5 years?
So it's our option to not renew it.
So it's our option.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in control.
They want us to be there as long as we want right now.
Yeah.
So it'd really be for our protection, because the state doesn't allow you to do more than 5 years.
Mhm.
So and they also don't want to sell it. So we started with that whole point right off the bat. That's off the table.
And from that point, even if you just put it at 5 years, let's say, under a 5-year lease, we're at $900,000. $300 to get in, $120 each year, that's $900,000. Now if you put it at another 10, we're talking 120 over another 10, that's 1.2 on top. We're at $2 million right there. So we're spending $2 million to be in an asset that we don't own over 2 years, over a 15-year lifespan, where we can potentially bond and invest. And I understand I'm thoughtful of the finances here and grateful that the board did such a great job of getting us out of debt. But sometimes you have to bite the bullet, and I fear that in this situation we're jumping at something that may be, oh wow, we have this opportunity, and we're being penny-wise, pound foolish in the long term. I think if we do something in terms of a major investment, we haven't done one in a long time, maybe now's the time to do it. I work in planning, I'm in that field, I know demographics. I see an uptick of the population growth that's going to be happening. I've seen it through the work I've done in the state, and it's only getting, precipitating itself even greater the way that, Denville is getting some really great accolades. We are a hot spot, we're a hot commodity. If you talk to the brokers, they know. So I know there's concerns with some of the other, some of the multifamily housing, but, that could be a growth area. I think that's a hot button topic for a lot of individuals. That could be an option for seniors potentially living there as well, who I think that's where some of our growth is happening, is the flipping of some of the homes and selling off some of those assets. I'm on the planning board, we're here all the time or on the zoning board, I'm sorry, we're here all the time looking at modifications to houses, we're getting, additions and all this stuff happening. It's for kids, it's for families, that's what's happening here. We're a hot commodity, we're a great community. And I think that while this may be kind of I think it's a little short-sighted as an opportunity here, and that if we are not, I think we have to think a little more broadly to kind of invest in our community in the long term, for where we can be, to kind of resolve some of these situations. And I have some serious reservations about spending, that kind of money for a rental property that we have no control over, and we don't know where it's going down the road. So with that, there's a few kind of operational pieces. My son dad's gonna recess, and is there? What are they gonna do? Is there a playground over there? Are they gonna constantly go back and forth, across, to go to things like that? So I'm trying to think if my wife would kill me if I didn't answer this. This is her list.
There is a playground.
Playground, and again, kind of just to reiterate, I think some of the funding pieces to it, last meeting, Mr. Forte, you mentioned that, if the bishop would only sell the building if it was in disrepair, we're basically giving them an extension for it to never be in disrepair, never buy it. And I think that's a little counterproductive to what we may try and do. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, we really appreciate it. I did want to
Jump over to a referendum.
One thing I did want to mention was you mentioned about the $300,000 investment and the fact that that money would be lost. So we're in negotiations, so I can't give you a final, but I can tell you that all of that's being considered with the negotiation on the lease. So, yeah, it's a very good point and something we've talked about.
Will the lease be made public to review, or will that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Once it's ready, like in final,
Yeah.
then it's totally available.
Anyone else?
Oh, and by the way, we are planning on putting a crosswalk there. I already talked to the police about it, so there'll be a crosswalk door to the sidewalk.
Yeah, well, is there sidewalk on the other side? Like, my concern, like, what entrance, they're gonna have to use the rear entrance, I'm
So the
assuming.
rear entrance, there's a sidewalk there, then there's a sidewalk across the street, and we'll have an officer that would cross it. That would be the safety plan.
Well,
for the,
and that was I forgot to mention that, the safety issues, I'm kind of concerned about that with, my kid had another lockdown drill, which is fine, I appreciate that, but that's opening a big opportunity for a safety consideration. I know you guys are thinking about this, but I don't see how this, Dr. Cullis, you said that this is not a big change and how, it's better for the students and things like that, and how, how we can mix them back and forth. Operation, I find, you're creating two separate schools. Let's call it what it is. You're gonna have a 4th and 5th grader in a separate school, and K through 3rd in a second, at Riverview.
I think the best answer to you is, you're asking specific questions, and I said in the beginning that I'm gonna have that stuff for you at the other meetings. This was the reason why is because we're not even finalized that we even know we can do it. But we wanted to be out there with everybody so that you weren't just finding out kind of late in the last minute. I guess in hindsight, you do it this way, but there's a downside to it. The downside is everybody's out there and asking questions I don't know the answers to yet. But once we get the legal stuff done that we're working on, after that, then we'll have like questions and an opportunity for the public to ask and be answered at 2 different times. And I don't know if I already said it, right? It'll be at the PTA meeting on the 16th of October. Then the following Wednesday at the 23rd, 1 p.m. in here we'll have, and we're going to video record it. So if somebody can't come, they can watch the video.
Kind of, we talked about the busing before, and how we're going to have, potentially having an entire half, 1/3 of the school moving back and forth across the street. Yet we bus the people who live across the street. This seems.
Wait, you're going to throw that wrinkle now? I got to bust those kids now?
Well, they're already bused.
Maybe we'll build like a tunnel or something.
That's the bridge, yeah. So
Another bridge, right?
that'll cost $1 million.
I just wanted to comment, all of your thoughts, especially from the educational view. I started there. I started where, how are we going to cross? Where's art going to be? That's what we've been thinking about. I just don't think we're ready to just close all of those details. And what Mr. Forte was saying about letting Mrs. Theodoropoulos say, here's my vision for my school. I want to see it like this rather than me dictate to her saying, you have to have art here, music here, in this room, and so forth. But all of those things, we definitely, because like they're looking at it from the perspective of finances and building and so forth, my role is to look at all of those details. And we definitely were already looking from day one, every little bit, where are the assemblies, where, you know, who's going to be the crosswalk monitors, how are we going to get fifth grade with kindergarten, all those things, and we'll have more details at those next meetings. And I did want to clarify too, when I was posed with, we came up with 6 options of which were going to be the most educationally sound, and when we got down to pre-K not probably being an option, K versus a 4-5 or a 3-4-5, that, I'm sorry, 5th grade central, which was what I thought would be a great idea. I came up with all these amazing ideas of how it could be this transitional school for executive functioning and getting ready for middle school. But looking at it, the transition, taking all of the students from around the district into one, it really totally becomes a different school because it has absolutely no connection to either school, which is what the research shows about the transition issues. When they're not connected anywhere, then I really had to go down the path of saying it will be less instructional impact to go with the same administration, the same philosophies, the same rules, the same set of teachers that they've been with since kindergarten, the same art teacher, the music teacher, than having it new. And that's really why I leaned more for the 3-4 over a 5.
So now it's,
I'm sorry, a 4-5
4-5.
over a central 5, where we
Yeah,
mentor
no, yeah.
everybody and
Yeah.
displace them, and they're not rockets anymore, and they're not lions, I'm sorry, I don't know why. Blank for a second. They're not lions, they're not rockets, they're something, when they're not Valley View. That's where the identity, when the research says they don't have an identity, I had to go from an instructional position that a 4-5 with an identity of still being a rocket, still having the same principal, the VP, the same, all the related arts are the same, still having an opportunity to see their old teachers and ride the same classes routes with their same siblings and so forth. I felt that was less transition than the other options, and that's really why I said that.
just one thing to that though, because I know, Mr. Forte, you said during the last meeting that, this is an opportunity and it has this flexibility, to meet our needs, which granted, that may be true. But, down the road, it's a little bit in conflict with what Dr. Cullis is saying, because you stated that, maybe we're in a 4-5 now, but depending on how the ebb and flow goes, maybe we make it into a 5-6, or then, it gives us that flexibility. And I kind of see that as, which is you're stating as a benefit to the St. Mary's opportunity, as a direct conflict to what Dr. Cullis is saying as this transitions. And, if you're weighing these things out, I see that as a problem, where, it's like, well, this year, because we have a lot of kindergarten or a lot of first graders, whatever the big grade is, that's the lump year. Well, what happens when that lump year becomes sixth graders? That, I know there's not constraints right now at Valley View, but who knows down the road? Maybe then are we going to shift 6 down to 5, and then are we just going to be constantly? Because unless you want to correct yourself, that's what was stated a month ago as a benefit to that, the flexibility that we can manipulate the district as needed in the years coming forward.
Yeah, and when I was speaking about that, I was talking about temporarily, like if you had bubbles. So in other words, are you going to build a school or do an addition if you know you have a bubble that's going through? Because you're going to spend a lot of money on something that you may not need in a few years. So when I was referring to that, I was really speaking about if this doesn't happen, like what we were all talking about, what we think is going to happen, but say it doesn't happen, we just have a bubble that moves through. Maybe when that bubble moves through to the middle school, maybe we do have to move some kids back then. I was just giving it an option, but it's not like I would prefer to do it. But I also don't want to go to the public and spend $10 million or $30 million on a building that we won't need just because we're dealing with a bubble. And again, I want to preface too that none of this is ideal, right? Because in a perfect world, we wouldn't have a school for 800 kids on the south side of town. I mean, that's not really the way to plan out a district. And we're also, I don't know if you recall, when I first got here, we had another building at 501 Okanagan that was just sitting there. So we're trying to kind of undo some things that may have been, happening for a long time, like the sale of the Main Street School.
So that actually, I forgot to answer my question. You mentioned earlier about that 30 acres. What's, you know, if we're not going to utilize it, is there a reason why we're keeping it? Is that an opportunity? Maybe we sell that asset. Maybe the district you know, is there a reason why we're maintaining that and keeping that? Maybe we sell that, and that could pay for some sort of a major investment to the assets we already have.
Yeah, so by the way, every single question you've asked tonight, we've asked on the board,
Oh,
which is
sure.
good, which is really good.
Sorry, I didn't go back and
No,
go through
no,
the last
no, I appreciate
it.
it, because it means that, like, and the same thing with everybody that's spoken tonight. I mean, Dr. Cullis and I literally had the exact same conversation we were just having, what is it, a month or so ago? It was over the summer. We sat and I was like, Cullis, like, I can't get around this 4 or 5. I can't get around this 5. Like, let's talk about it. Okay, well, if it's $1 million, like, it's kind of, I look at it and say, we've saved a good amount of money over the years, right? We've been very financially smart, I think, as a board. So if we need to spend it, let's spend it, right? Like, you don't save your money your whole life to then retire at 75 and die at 76, right? It's just kind of like, if you save the money, let's spend it if we have it. We don't have $10 million saved up, by the way, so we don't have the ability to go over and say, hey, let's go pay cash for an addition. But, you know, if we needed $700,000, we do have it on reserve. You know, Damaris is probably, if she was close enough, kicking me under the table because she's saying, you know, we saved that money for an emergency or a roof. Like, we've got roofs to do, by the way. We still have a big liability on roofs that are out there that we know are going to have to be done within a few years. So all the things you've asked have been questions we talked about. Why not sell Nicole Drive is a great question. And I can only speak for 107, and certainly anybody from the board can give their opinion too. So a couple of problems with selling that property. Number one, it's one of very, 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 very few, maybe one other, maybe two other if you really stretch it, properties in town that you could build a school on. Mr. Forte said it's not the perfect location to build a school. But guess what? It might be the best of the options. One of the other better options is about to build 180 townhomes on it, which was one we looked at 10, 15 years ago. So that option is now gone. So we looked at 3, maybe 4 options. I wasn't on the board at the time, but I remember looking at the report. There were 3 or 4. One of them is now gone. So there's probably 2, maybe 3 options in town. One of them is that property. If we sold it, that's off the table. So if 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I look and say one of our jobs is to not to tie the hands of a board in the future. So I prefer to say, let's give it as an option. Maybe not the best option, but it's an option. That's number one. Number two, if you sell that property, a developer will build it and build probably 500 townhomes on that property in a heartbeat. They'll be in front of you as the zoning board. Because that will change all the zoning immediately. So, you know, and it becomes, by the way, you know, part of the COA formula, as you might know, takes into account some of these things that are owned by government entities, and I believe that was taken off the list. So some of the acreage was taken off as far as available land, which is great. So, you know, not off the table, and nothing's off the table, but I would say my biggest thing is I wouldn't want it to, like, Mr. Forte mentioned the fact that Main Street School was sold for $1. At that time, that board, I'm sure, thought it was a great idea, and now we're like, oh. The fact that the Foundation for the Blind, which is now Celebrate the Children, the fact that the board at that point didn't take advantage of that property, they were in a different financial position, by the way. They weren't in the financial position we are now. So I don't want to speak that they should have or whatever, but I know they looked at it and they decided to pass on it. You know, once again, a little bit of, I look back now, hindsight being 2020, going, gosh, that would have been an awesome location for another school. It was already a school. It was built, you know, it would not have taken a lot to get it up and running. So I kind of look at the building across the street in a similar way. You know, are we going to kick ourselves if we don't do something with it? Because, by the way, the other side of this is if we don't do something with it, that building will not be empty. Okay? So if we're not in it, somebody else will be. If a private school takes that over, and if they're a specialized private school for certain students that have special needs, I will tell you that when Celebrate the Children took over that building and built their school there, we had families that moved to Denville because that school was there. So if they lived in Morris Plains and that school cost $50,000 a year to the Morris Plains Board of Education, and that family moved to Denville because they wanted to be close to the school, understandably, we now pick up the bill for that. And I'm not saying these are real numbers, I'm just giving theoreticals. But, so, there, once again, pros and cons, right? We're always looking at them. So certainly all the things you bring up are things that we discuss all the time. I appreciate if you ever have other ideas, or these ideas you brought out, the things you talked about are certainly things that we're discussing, so.
I agree with you with the not selling the property, so. You only have it once.
It's good, I thought you were a developer. Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I add on there a little bit more? Just that, I just feel like that there's only a detriment to Riverview. You do this. Like, I don't see the benefit of this being 4 or 5, what that does. Lakeview's not impacted either way, and Riverview's only negatively impacted. I don't see the positive for Riverview. I mean, that our class sizes get smaller is a positive, but I'm sure then we probably feed in some more Lakeview kids, probably over to Riverview and shrink everybody. I don't see the.
Well, can I, do you mind if I?
Yeah, no, does anybody else have any other comments? I'm gonna open up to board comments, so Dino.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So there's, I think, 4 of us that are Riverview parents on the board. So what you haven't seen behind the scenes are a lot of skeptical questions and a lot of back and forth debate, some intense debate about that. I agree with you in that it was a concern to me. Of course, we have to look at the district as a whole, obviously, so we have to look at all the students. But being a Riverview parent, my daughter's in high school now, and my son's in 5th grade, yeah, it's a concern. I do think this is the best thing for the district, and I don't think it's all detrimental to Riverview. I actually think there's opportunities to make it, to improve the culture or do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do. 4 and 5 over there, Dr. Collison, the curriculum was talking about the ability to kind of get them ready for Valley View by doing some things over there that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do when they're all in the same building. The additional space is a big deal for us. We really are space constrained. If you walk through our schools, we are tight all the time. So, being able to space everything out and some of the instruction that we do, special education, speech, a lot of times these kids are on top of each other. The fact that we lost the music group this year is not great. So if we don't do this, we're looking at more art on the card. All of those things that I believe occurred after 2001, when we really had big numbers, that's absolutely not where I like to see the schools go. So, what I give you comfort is that we are asking really tough questions, and as Riverview parents particularly, I think we're really invested in making sure it's the best possible solution. So, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
I'll add on just like 2 cents. Riverview parent, 1st grade, I'm right there with you. It's, my kid's going to be going through this in 5 years. A lot of the concerns we've had, like the 5th graders helping the kindergartners with the bus, it's one of the first things I brought up. And I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. That can still happen. I'm not promising anything because that's, like I said, that's all in the air. But I'm like, we're all thinking about that. And I mean, my personal hope is that this is something that will be temporary, and then if we have a continued need, we have some new facilities, either new building or addition or something like that. I don't know if I want this permanently, but I don't see how we can, how we can say no. It's the right space, the right size, the right location. It all just kind of is falling into place. I don't like the walking back and forth between the buildings, but it's better than a trailer. It would be a secure building, not a trailer that would be secure. So I don't think it's ideal, but even with my kid going through what I think might be the worst, or if it's going to be the worst of it, what's the other option? Wait 3 years until we can have something else built? I don't know.
I know the board thought and had all these different options. If this didn't arrive on our doorstep, what was the board going to do this year? Or the next year? Like, what was going to happen? If this didn't arrive,
Yeah,
what
so
was
I think you look at your best of your options, and if the only option on our doorstep was to do a referendum, and by the way, that's not a guarantee, because the public can vote no.
Yeah.
So, we are a much different public entity, and I think everybody needs to understand this, than, for instance, a town council. Town council, if they want to go buy a fire truck, and they want to float debt for that and spread it over 30 years, they just have to approve it. I don't want to downplay that they have a process for it, but they don't have to go to public vote. Anytime we float debt, we have to go to public vote. And by the way, other districts do it all the time. I mean, other districts, the things that we have done in this district under our operational budget, security vestibules, class 3 officers, on and on, and locker room renovation. What's that? Roofs, oh my gosh, when I go to meetings with other board members and they say to me that I tell them that we've done the roofs in our budget, they're like, that's not possible, there's no way you must have floated that, you didn't know. No, we didn't float that, we actually did what I do when I need a roof on my house, is I go, okay, in 5 years I'm gonna need a roof, so let me save every year, and then when you spend, like, it's a savings account, that's why I've always looked at it when I've been on the board, and I can tell you that most boards and most Board of Eds do not look at it that way, and they're going to float debt every 5 to 10 years where they need a roof and they need another, new gym or whatever it might be. Our philosophy, at least on this board, since I've been on the board, has been different. We want to get rid of the debt. We want to be able to, do the best thing we can, because I say it all the time. Yeah, money's cheap these days, but it's not free. So you're still paying for it. And Mr. Can, I'm sure when he talks, he can talk a little bit about kind of, he's done some financial looks at, okay, well, if you float debt, what's the cost long term, and if your money up front. So we've done a lot of those analysis. So it's not something that we take lightly, and it's not something I think that we've made a decision on. But what will we do? Well, we would do the best we could and fit the kids in where we needed to. But is it ideal to have kids having class or doing art on a card or having larger classes? I mean. But, we talk about 20 or 23, but I can tell you that that's because our board policy has lower than the state regulations, right? We could go up to larger classes if we had to. We just don't want to. And that's the decision we have to make. When we can sit here as a board, do we absolutely need space? No. But, if we want to go to 25 or 26 in a kindergarten classroom, what's the state allow you to do? Do you know what I'm talking about? 25?
25.
The only one
Well,
is-
we've been 25, consistently.
Yeah.
We don't have any more space, I think, so it's not, they have been full. They've gone to 27 in some things. There is no more rooms. And we've made 3 new rooms this year. There's nowhere else to put them. There's no more rooms. So we're out. I guess the short term is, music, art, STEM, computers into the classrooms.
And just so you know too, in addition to these options, we've looked at, this might sound literally crazy, but we've literally looked at it, is there an office building that we could transition into? We've looked at that. We've called towns around us and said, do you have room in your schools if we needed extra space? Believe me, we didn't go into this just shotgun. Although, we also did know when we did our long-term planning that we heard the rumors about St. Mary's Prep and declining enrollment and the potential there. So it's not like this just came up in June and we were like, oh wow, okay, but now we can head down that direction. And like I said, we looked at Morris County Vocational School too at one point.
Just to kind of follow up, because I think, school, you said that this is not a permanent solution. And that's, as a taxpayer, I find that hard where we're paying into an asset that is not, I'd rather say, and honestly, my youngest will probably get the worst brunt of all this. He's going to be in kindergarten next year. If we build it, if we're in this transition thing or using this for 5 years or the next 15, whatever it is, we're paying into that, and we're not getting any return on investment coming back out as taxpayers. If even if it is temporary, we're still going to have to spend $900,000 to be in there for 5 years. And I find that really hard as a taxpayer to pay $900,000 there, where that's 1/10 what we have to do to bond to build a new addition onto Riverview. And that's something that we own. And we have it. We have the control there. I find that really hard to try and make a temporary solution and still invest in
But
those
it's important to note that the two things aren't really equal. One is a school with 18 classrooms, a gym, all the other things. That's about 6-7 classrooms we're talking about. So it's not.
Are we allowed to use those spaces? Because that was because that's during your thing last time. You said that depending on what the diocese, I know they use CCD over there. How are they going to be able to? How is that flex space allowed? Then you get into the whole religious aspect of it, where it is a religious school right now. Whatever your religious affiliation or none. Is that all going to get stripped out? How is that being left in the building for CCD and all these other things?
That has to come out, so that's.
Yeah, exactly, I know, yeah.
Yeah, so that all comes out. But I just want to make sure you're understanding that even though one is $10 million and the other one we're just renting, it is a big difference.
Yeah, so what you're getting, yeah.
You get a lot more.
And it
But
may
also
be a
you're getting a
temporary-
brand new building versus a retrofit from 1950 or whenever that building was built. Because I was in there a couple weeks ago and it's pretty stark.
And I would say too, one of the reasons why we may say, maybe, we looked at these demography reports, we looked at the enrollment things. The problem with it possibly being a temporary solution is, this might be a temporary problem. So if we spend $10 million and then the classrooms are empty, it's like,
Should've built
you
a
know,
school.
I mean, and no offense to people that decided to build this building, but they built this building and they had empty offices upstairs a couple years ago. There's a reason why we moved in here, is because they overbuilt for this building, right? So
Classrooms don't
there's
go
always
empty.
that balance back and forth. Yeah.
In a school, classrooms don't get empty, they can get filled with, I don't know, in a school, we never have empty classrooms, it's never an issue.
But if I may jump in, one of the things we talked about 2 years ago when we went to the strategic plan was, if we spent $10 million and built, I believe, 6 or 7 classrooms, and we were wrong to the low side. Now we put a $10 million referendum out there, we built 6 or 7 classrooms, they're not enough, right? So we really wrestled very hard with the idea of, can we buy ourselves some time, for lack of a better term, to see what the future is going to bring? You know, a few years ago, it wasn't clear to any of us that the town was going to change over so much. And besides the developments, which even haven't occurred, my theory personally is that the biggest increase we've seen is because the empty nesters have waited out the downfall. They came back. Now they can get out of their houses. So we have a lot of houses that were not contributing students to our population. Now that are. Is that going to continue? My personal feeling is yes. Every time I go out for a jog in the morning, I see a pregnant woman walking dogs, and I see baby carriages. It's amazing in my neighborhood how many millennials have moved in. But is that going to continue for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years? We're just not sure. So to me, this is a bridge. This is, in my mind, a pretty good bridge.
And there was a cost with the trailers. I didn't realize they were so expensive as he said to me.
Everything schools do are expensive, right? Even those crummy-looking trailers will cost a ridiculous amount of money to get permitted, to get approved, to get to the point where you could actually have students in them. And the waiver, and then you don't waiver, right? Because it's right, it's substandard space. You have to do all that.
And then it takes 3 times as long to do.
5 years.
So I consider myself a numbers guy. And one of the biggest questions that I ask is, how are we going to approach this problem fiscally responsibly? Right? Because I agree with you that any monies that we invest in a temporary lease could potentially be not a very good business decision. So one of the biggest comments, or one of the biggest things that resonated with me is that we are going to be able to do St. Mary's within our budget, within our capacity to continue to operate without having to go to referendum. And that was huge for me because first, I want to appreciate the passion that you all have here because for me, I always thought referendum was sort of like a voodoo where it's like, you guys want to do what? I mean, what is that going to mean to our taxes, right? And so to hear that you want to go to referendum is kind of refreshing in my opinion. But as Dino said, we've got so many different factors that we're trying to take into account, such as what is that high side number going to be in terms of our students? And what if we do underestimate, right? What if we choose the wrong investment? The other part was, if we are going to build, where are we going to put our students now, right? And if we are going to build an attachment to Riverview, how is that going to look? How is that going to disrupt our children's learning, the culture, everything else? And is there an interim solution that can help bridge that, as Dino said? And I thought, to me, the fact that we could do St. Mary's within our budget, and if we do have to go to referendum to build an add-on, build a new one, add on, whether it's Lakeview, we have the time. And then we have a place where we can put them where we won't interrupt their educational learning too drastically, too dramatically. Because I agree, I think substandard space is not a solution. I think we all agree that a substandard space from a security standpoint would really put our children at risk. Whereas knowing Steve, knowing the administration, they will make sure that everything will be properly done within St. Mary's to meet code or meet our standards, our Steve standards that he has established with our 3 other buildings at this point. One of the things that I've learned in my 1.5 years is that the culture and the status that we have received is largely due to the administration that's here now. So I, in my opinion, believe that a lot of the issues that you addressed, like my daughter is in 4th grade now. If this were to pan out, she probably would be in 5th grade in St. Mary's. And I would believe that the administration would find ways to ensure that that culture is continued because they spent so much time building it. I mean, they've hired the staff, whether it's, Ms. Theodoropoulos or anyone else who has really contributed. They built a strong foundation. And to me, that's what's most important, that we've got that foundation. If we need to build and add on additional, we're going to have time, and they're going to do everything possible to ensure that our children's education is not interrupted, and everything else, all the bells and whistles, and that makes our school district, our district so wonderful that they will do everything in their power to do that. And I have an ultimate faith in that. So to me, fiscally and everything else that I've seen in my year and a half here, it just makes so much sense. Granted, we may be investing in a building that is not ours, but that also makes sure that our children's education is not interrupted, right? I mean, we talked about how much we want to spend on making sure that our children are happy and, everything else. And to me, that is money well spent. And so that's hard to, all of the comments, I just love the passion that you all have, and I'm just grateful that you
Sorry, Mr. Cassidy, jumped over you.
Yeah, some very good comments. Thank you for taking the time to come in tonight. I know it's getting late. That's okay. One thing I'm concerned about is, people start talking about this, you start getting some rumors. Like you talked about the mentoring of the kindergarten students. I haven't heard anything that's going to stop. Just because the kids move across, 5th graders to be across the street. So, that starts carrying through, people getting lanced over that type of thing. So that type of concerns are all the, a rumor like that. I mean, I think that's a great program. My granddaughters were 5th grade mentors to the kindergarten kids. They enjoy doing that. They're valuing it now. And my kids went to Riverview. So that's just one of the value add that we do in the Denver school system. I think it's terrific for the older kids to develop some leadership doing that. It's great for the kindergarten kids to get in that comfort zone when they start school for the first time. So, and I'm sure that's something Mrs. T is going to look at. I've been in town a long time. Some of my in-laws went to St. Mary's, so the school's been here for over 50 years, actually. I forgot the exact date, but it's been here, so.
Around the same as Riverview.
Yeah, so that's been a very viable school in the community for a long time, along with the premises. The kids do research, recess and gym in the back there. I've seen them, go across the street and use the Gardner Field too. I've seen the St. Mary's kids playing over there periodically when I drive around town. They got a small gym, but it's a nice gym. And Steve and the architect have spent a lot of time in the school to figure out what we have to do, and one of the top priorities here is security for the kids. So we're going to make sure that in school at the same security level that we have in the other schools. So that's all being looked into. A lot of details still have to be worked out. In terms of a decision, I was on the board when we tried to tee up a new school, a new middle school about 12 years ago. And while everybody here seems to be receptive to a referendum, a lot of citizens in the town don't like referendums, and they don't support them. And what happened, it never got to the point where we had to do a referendum because we had a flood, we had a bad snowstorm, and we had a recession. And next thing you know, the population started going down, the student population went down, and it started to creep up a little bit now. So, like Dino pointed out with the demographics in our neighborhood, you're probably going to see the population go up for another maybe 10 or 15 years, and a lot of those people will age out and downsize to small homes, or if things stay the same, they'll move out of state, like a lot of my friends are doing, because it's too costly to live here for them. And so, and back to the referendum too, we also had a second question a number of years ago, an extracurricular. We needed $60,000 to maintain our sports programs and the after-school clubs. That lost by 11 votes. And the parents had to pony up the money for those. You know, some of the sports programs kicked into to help out. So 11 votes, $60,000. You know, the other board members did not, you know, I voted no on that. They didn't want to take $60,000 out of the budget. They wanted to put the extracurricular out there instead of cutting something like French. So 11 votes, $60,000, it didn't pass. So referendums are really hard to get through. And the current board, the past board, did a great job being fiscally prudent, getting millions and millions of dollars of projects done. Roofs, bathrooms, technology, asbestos removal and abatement, tile floors. These schools look great now. When I first came to the school board, these bathrooms were disgusting. Urine stains on the floor, they smell terrible, there's tile missing, so we chipped away at it. When you look at the newspapers in the morning, some of these school districts are teeing up, you know, $15 million, $20 million referendums because they couldn't do it in the budget like we've done. So it's, this isn't the greatest decision in the same areas, but it's probably the most cost beneficial right now, and you know, it gives us a little breathing room until we see what happens with the population. But it's probably going to go up for a while and then it'll go down again. So if you look, we had built that middle school for originally was $60 million. I think we got it down to $40 million after taking out the swimming pools, some of the other bells and whistles. Yeah, you probably have an empty school now, or hardly used, and the maintenance of that school. So we've done the best we can here, and I think getting this St. Mary's thing coming on, you know, on our radar screen and dealing with it is the right way to go. For the short term and possibly the long term. I mean, the outlook would be 15 years if we stay, right? These rules.
Yeah, you could get out of it after 5.
Yeah, if we wanted to get out of here at 5. I'm done.
Mr. Cass?
So I just want to echo everybody's thanks for coming and the passion that you guys have. And I hope that you take nothing from this meeting more. I hope that you appreciate that everything, the passion that you guys have brought to the meeting tonight, like Mike said, you've asked these questions. These are thoughts that we have had. 6 out of 7 of us are parents within the district. All 7 of us have family currently in the district. So this is not something that we take lightly. This is our first conversation really with the public about this. You know, you guys kind of watched last meeting and now you're here to discuss it. So unfortunately, like Mr. Forte said, there aren't all the answers, but they will come. I'm so sorry, sir, I don't recall your name.
Oh, of course, that.
Something specifically you said that I just wanted to address about the character relation. And you said, you know, you won't have that. It's a school of character and the children have these relationships, and when you separate 4th and 5th, we won't have that. I think that if I've learned nothing else sitting on this board for almost 3 years, I've learned to have faith in Dr. Cullis and faith in Mr. Forte that they can create that. They did create it. This is the National School of Character. We weren't there a few years ago. We didn't have Class 3 officers in every building a few years ago. The administration that sits here tonight and the administration within the buildings that we currently have are the people that have created the wonderful schools that we all appreciate. Whatever the decision is, whether it be St. Mary's or another decision, it's obviously a difficult choice. It will be a change for the students, but I have faith in our administrators and our staff that they will continue to make that the character and the family atmosphere that they've created in the schools, they will make that more of a focus while also looking at, you know, and giving the children the best education that they have.
I would like to say that I am very glad to hear a lot of these same questions that we've been asking among ourselves echoed in the public, because I like to think that means we have a feel for what the public's concerns are. Other than that, going last, everybody's pretty much said everything that could be said.
I would kind of cap it off with just one last comment, is that there's no perfect scenario. And if we had a perfect scenario today, that in 5 years or 10 years from now, like Mr. Forte said, if we get a bubble and that changes, that there's no perfect way to set it up. Lakeview, with as large as it is, and you would think, oh, it's easy to adapt. I mean, you can talk to Dr. Cullis and Mr. Forte, and they can tell you a lot of challenges they have in such a large school, and the amount of students they have, and the challenges they have there. Even if we built a school tomorrow, it wouldn't be a perfect configuration. We would still have to deal with kind of, okay, how do we lay out the schools? We discussed a few years ago, do we want to do grade level schooling where you do K through 3 or K through 2 and then 3, 4, 5 and then 6, 7, 8, where every student in the district does, it's not a community school, it's they all go to Lakeview, they all go to Riverview, they all go to Valley View. When we sat down and looked at it, the numbers didn't get us to a point where we felt it was going to be as educationally benefited we would like to. So that would be the ideal scenario, right? If you have schools available to go K through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The numbers just didn't work out that way. So there's never, I would say, unfortunately, it's not a perfect scenario. But hopefully you can see that we're really truly trying to do what we think is best. I can promise everyone that considerations, there's a balance between financial and educational. And I can tell you there's never a time on this board I ever felt we made a financial decision that was going to be detrimental to the education of students in this district, period. And I can tell you, for as long as I'll be in this seat, I will not vote to ever do anything that is going to be just a financial decision, period. Because that's the conversations I have with Dr. Cullis, Mr. Forte all the time, and everybody on this board does. I can promise you that the conversation is always about what's best for the kids. Okay, how can we make that happen? Can we always get what's exactly perfect for the educational benefit? No, but if you look and you say, here's our options, we're going to choose one that's going to not be detrimental to the education of the students in this district. So I can promise you those are all considerations that we have. I want to echo everybody's thoughts or comments for thanking you to come out, and I would ask that you continue the conversation. Our contact information is on the website. Don't hesitate to shoot me an email. I'll give you my cell phone number. We can have a discussion. I'm happy to talk about it more, particularly as we progress, because as we progress, if we continue down this road, there's going to be a lot of these details to talk about. Mr. Forte is going to make time available for folks to come in and ask questions. Please have others get in contact with us so that we can continue the conversation, because we don't have it all figured out yet. But I can promise you that we're going to do the absolute best we can to make sure it's educationally beneficial and financially feasible for the district and the town. So thank you very much for coming. Anybody have anything else that I missed? Or you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting.
Bye.
Pretty exciting. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Move on to the third.
Back on Wednesday, someone else will stay.
Yeah, Chris, where do you sit?
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our agenda and move on to item F. Superintendent's comment.
Okay. Okay, so our Riverview East-West Campus presentation will be at the Riverview PTA meeting October 16th at 6 p.m. and also on October 23rd at 1 p.m. at Town Hall. Foundation of Denville Golf Outing, September 23rd. You can buy your tickets on the Foundation of Denville website, which you can also navigate through our website. There's also a dinner that you can go to if you're not interested in just golfing. You can go just for the dinner. And it supports a program that has donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Denville schools over the last few years. Project update. Our the Valley View Field upgrades is going through DEP and DOE permit phase. So we have to get a DEP permit due to the fact it's in that riparian buffer, and then we also need DOE permits just because we always need DOE permits. The lots and the bollards, the lots are done, both lots at Valley View and Lakeview, and the bollards are installed and up and running at Lakeview. And the locker room looks terrific in my mind. There's a bench or two that still needs to be installed, but overall it's complete up there. Don, if you want to, I'll take you for a personal tour. I know it's been one of your babies, right? So just,
More time coming.
you let me know, and we'll take a walk through. I don't know, Tino, did you get a chance to look at it?
No, I'd like to catch
Yeah,
all
sure.
of that.
It looked pretty nice, I was pretty happy.
I'd be interested in doing that as well.
And if you remember,
Not able to see it.
our engineer, our architect said that we should budget $400,000 for that project for both bathrooms, and we ended up doing it for around $120,000. Now, we didn't do a total gut, but we did a really nice remodeling and renovation of that locker room that was all the original stuff from when the school was built. So it looks terrific in there. And no referendum. That's it for my report.
Thank you, Mr. Forte. Dr. Cullis, Assistant Superintendent comments?
Sure, just an update, kindergarten, they're slowly creeping in, and we also keep getting new first graders, which, the few grades that we didn't need in this first and eighth, and those are the two that keep coming. But we also did get some more kindergarten this week, so we're at 179, 98 Lakeview, 81 Riverview. NJSLA student reports are being mailed this Wednesday, so you should expect them in your homes by probably Friday or Saturday. That. And then number 3, our Future Ready update. So I have exciting, thrilling news that we just heard today that all 3 schools received the RON certification, Future Ready RON certification. So thank you to the staff. It has been, I mean, it was 3 months of really long days, maybe 4 months actually, of really, really long days. And especially a huge thanks to Cindy Costanza, our tech manager, who in the summer, she and I, went through every single one of those pieces of data and linked to make sure they worked. And we're just thrilled that we received all 3. So wish they were here too. But out there in the community today. And we announced it in the schools at the end of the day today. And we'll go down and receive our award in Atlantic City in October. Awards, I should say. 3 awards. This concludes the Assistant Superintendent's report.
Mike, if I could just make a comment. So congratulations, obviously, as the board liaison to that. Congratulations, you guys did a tremendous amount of work. Could I ask that maybe after the school board's presentation, we bring the team in?
Yes, I really want to do that, to have all of that, because it's a large team, and I want to all come in and be acknowledged.
Dr. Cullis just said they had 4 months of really long days. If you want to bring them to a board meeting,
Yes.
that's exactly what they're looking forward to.
Because as we said earlier, the good deed goes unpunished.
But they'll come in.
Thank you.
They were so excited.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis, and congratulations to the team, and appreciate all your hard work. Maris, any business administrator comments?
No comment.
Okay.
Sorry, could I circle back to the saying something one time? I know we look at kindergartners if they're the oldest in their family.
Yes.
Have we been doing that with first grade enrollment?
The first grade enrollment was the first, you mean the new ones that you
In
said
other
here?
words, do we know when new first graders are coming in, are they the oldest in their family?
I can check on that, but I knew that data from the ones that enrolled as kindergartners. I knew that it was
Yeah.
50%. I don't know about this number that has come in. We got 8, I think, at Riverview over the summer, extra, and I don't know. I can check on that.
Is that an unusual number?
Well, it was a normal number when we didn't have full kindergarten. But then when we went to full day kindergarten, it was not very common that first grade was when people moved here. So, and it was not from St. Mary's. I mean, we just had a lot of young families moving here. So, we had 5 the first day of school first. And they different grades. But
Just shut up.
they show up, as I said, they see the bus and they go, oh, gosh, oh, we should register.
That's good.
That's exciting.
Thank you, Dr. Cullis, thank you, Damaris. Let's see, it is 9:19, we'll open up for another open public comment section for any agenda items. Seeing no one rush to the microphone, I will close our open public comment section at 9:19, and we'll move on to the agenda. Under old business? It's under old
Yeah, under
business.
report, under day, 3 days, so under education reports. That's what we're going to do. BV 12. It'll happen because of the-
The discussion we had earlier.
yeah, to reaffirm.
Here. You're doing it all this?
Yeah, 'cause that's what usually what they do.
So reaffirm the findings HIB-VV-12. And then also wrote from school year 18-19.
Should we read that in as whoever moves it? Steve, or?
I'm not sure of the process for that.
I can certainly do it.
So we're reading it for the record.
Okay. Mr. Casper, do you mind moving old business?
Sure. 3 items on old business action to be taken. A is to approve the reports from our August 2019 meetings. We have the treasurer's school monies report, the board secretary report. D, we have the education reports, which the business administrator will read into the record.
The board would like to affirm findings from HIB-VV-12 from school year 18-19.
And item C, that we approve the minutes from our work and regular session meeting and executive session, August 19th, 2019.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Capella. Any questions, comments?
So we're just calling that B1 when we read it?
B1.
Okay.
Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes?
Mr. Lure?
Yes, I have to abstain on item C, please.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Mr. Lewis, would you mind moving us through personnel?
Certainly. I would like to move items under personnel 1 through 6. 1 through 9 as a block, if there are no objections.
6 is maintained.
And you have it.
Oh, I forgot about it.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, it's the addendum is item 1S. There are new hires. Item 1 is new hires for drivers, aides, team nurses. We have additional time for back to school night, parent training. We have resignations and homework help tutors. I think that covers pretty much everything. We have a list of substitutes. We are approving the termination of employee 1165. Family Medical Leave Act approvals. And was it item 6 that we were going to, without item 6? Good job this tonight. Miracles for Dr. Cullis and Mrs. Gorowski, and the attached list of personnel for the after-school enrichment classes.
Second.
I would like to say that there are a few things in here. The retroactive approval for the first 3 is due entirely to the fact that we only have 1 meeting in August and September. That's not an issue, that's not something because the administration was slacking. Steve and I discussed employee, item 3, the termination of employee 1165, which was due to apparently he hasn't reported for work this school year.
We need to table item number 6 for Mr. Cortez Santiago. We would like to have friendly amendment.
I'm sorry, I thought I specifically said
Yeah,
we're
he said he could be.
gonna.
Yeah, I think you were 1 through 5 and 6.
I talked
So
about.
if we don't move it, Damaris, we're good? Okay.
And who seconded that?
Mr. Kim.
Mr. Kim.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't do a very good job this month.
The new drivers that are on here, letters E, H, and I, Were these drivers mentioned during our operations committee?
They were hired after,
They were hired after?
yes,
But we knew about them, right?
yes, we is in
These are other additional.
Right, so
Right, yeah.
we were still
We're still behind.
in our,
Still behind, and one actually used to be with us and is returned, and one's,
so it doesn't change our situation currently with
not
our,
necessarily,
outsource.
she's still with substitute drivers.
right?
So are we still, it was my understanding at our meeting that with this vote of approving these personnel, that we would then have, for our current runs, we would have full staff with 2 permanent floats.
Correct.
Okay.
These including
With these
substitute
included.
drivers, we have full staff for every one, we have a driver for every bus and 2 additional seats.
Plus the 3 outsourced
And
routes.
Right, yes. So the runs that we,
Hey, can I just get clarification on H? Is there a typo there? It should be AM run 9/1/19 through 11/3/2019? Is that
It should be.
That should be a-
11:30,
11/30? Okay, okay. Just want to say it was a 3 or 2.
Should we
Okay.
slash that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, right. You said this last year.
yeah. I couldn't tell if it was 3 and then missing the slash instead of 0. Okay, thank you.
would someone mind explaining, L? I don't know that I've seen that before, so I don't know if this is for a specific situation or.
Okay. That's for the Riverview assisting the nurse.
Yeah.
This is just a different person, the person that we had do it, retired. So just for 3 hours per week, somebody, she does clerical work for the
Oh,
nurse.
it's clerical work.
You know,
Okay,
like
thank you.
inputting stuff into the
Yep.
computer.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello,
Yes.
Mr. Cass,
Yes.
Mr. Dorr,
Yes.
Mr. Kim,
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner,
Yes.
Mrs. Gould,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes. Mr. Capello, we can move us through instruction and program.
Absolutely. If there are no objections under instruction and program, I would like to move items 1 through 3. Also calling your attention to the addendum item 2G. These are field trip requests. We also have approval of workshop expenses for various workshops for various personnel. Also, we have the New Jersey School Board workshop expense approval for among other people, myself included. We also have the approval on number 3 for various students to observe in attendance.
I'll second.
Just for clarification for the public that are here or watching, 2A is for funding from Morris Catholic, because we are the local school district closest. That is not our money. We are just the custodians of passing it through. So it needs to be approved since it's state money and goes through our agendas. I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Dr.
Well, I've never seen, on the addendum, the workshops that the VPs are attending. Can you just explain a little bit about it?
This particular workshop?
Yeah.
So, we use, a continuum has information on, from pre-K really through 8th grade, everything of what skill, like reading skill should be at kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, like what each letter level looks like and so forth. And they do that for writing, reading, phonics, grammar. And it's been a while since we've trained on this. We've been using it for quite a while, but I asked for VPs to attend so that we can refresh it in our collaborative times. We do a lot of using it. So that's what it really is. It's awesome now is really the one who came up with that A to Z reading levels and what skills go with what determines an A, what determines a B, what's a C. And so we use the continuums in our classrooms now, but I just wanted to be refreshing on this.
clarification on 3D, despite that being the same last name as mine, it's not a relative. Any other questions? Make sure Mr. Capello, Mr. Kim, you abstain.
So, apparently, according to Stress, we actually don't have to, which I actually wasn't sure I told that.
I asked,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear any of that.
I'm so sorry, there's, on the bills list, is check for the New Jersey School Board Association that is for the payment of the workshop and the city October, which Mr. Capello and Mr. Ken will be attending. They did not have to abstain from those checks. It's a new rate.
That doesn't mean you can't abstain.
Oh, don't worry, you'll see them all, you'll see them all.
All right, any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes on all except the abundance of caution, I will abstain on 2E.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Kim?
Yes, abstaining from 2E.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Mr. Kim, would you mind moving us through policy revisions?
I'd be happy to. If no one objects, I'd like to move number 1, policy revisions, policy number 3212, attendance teaching staff, and policy 4212, attendance support staff for first reading.
Second. Any questions?
Maybe a few offices coming for you guys. This is just the beginning, so there's about 15 coming for this one.
So we had a little bit of a discussion about these policies in IMP.
Well, it was kind of personal.
Well, it's segued to personnel. I always lose track of when we actually switch over. And there is some language in there about making good decisions that would not impact your ability to work. Steve didn't feel that they were going to be adding anything to the policy. I kind of thought it helped. I don't understand some of this. Really Jack asked me word, but he felt it didn't really add anything. So we kind of talked through and decided to make sure I have it.
I was actually gonna ask if it was a legal change or, like, was it one of those things that where it came from?
The cross out?
Yeah, the cross out.
The cross out was for me discussing it with the administrative team and concerns what we're trying to accomplish.
Got it. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Abstain.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. Mr. Cass, are you on with finance?
Under finance, we have 7 items for the board to approve. Number 1 is to approve the checklist, the check register for current expenses, general organization, elementary enrichment. Number 2 is to approve a student to go to the Central Park School at a cost of $99,024. Number 3 is to outsource the following joint transportation agreement with Hunterdon Educational Service Commission for the upcoming school year. The routes are listed there with the cost of each route. Number 4 is to approve the attached meeting bond from Valley Middle School. Books are going to be offered to the public prior to being donated to a local charity. Number 5, that we accept a grant from the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation in the amount of $500 for Riverview School to support the school library. Number 6 is to accept a donation for the Dental Municipal Alliance in the amount of $2,000 for the upcoming school year. Number 7, accept a donation from the Valley PTA for the following items listed A through F, valued at approximately $16,682.
Second. Mr. Kim? So, Mr. Cass, on number 7, Mrs. Wagner just pointed out, I think you read in Valley View PTA, not Lakeview. You accept a friendly amendment, but that should be Lakeview, correct?
Okay. Do you have any words for it?
Steve, the National School of Character sign, is that more than what's there right now? You know what that is?
You know what we just got?
Yeah.
They look at playing on the building right now, correct?
Right, it says $1,483.
Okay.
I was like, that's a really expensive banner.
No, it's a metal one.
Oh.
Metal one.
I was like, it's a banner.
It's a permanent.
National School of Character has a racket going there. Like, yeah, you want it? It's like Sinorama can make that thing for like $200.
I know, it's raised
Is that? Yeah, is it permanent? Like goes under Lakeview School, almost like the one that says like the blue ribbon ones that are out there. Certain
Permanent metal sign.
Oh, cool. We talked to Riverview PTA about, or have we not gotten?
They already have them.
They already have it, okay.
Yeah, they just decided to use it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on the books.
Yeah.
Some of them were like only written and acquired in 2013, so I was wondering, I understand the older ones, they weren't used, but I was wondering, was it just from 6 years of it hadn't been turned out?
Some of that with the condition too, if it's a paperback, if it's a paperback book, it just gets beat up.
It's almost the opposite, it's used too much.
Okay. No, I just reviewed it, and I understand, the older ones make sense.
Like some of the old, like research books, they, they're not.
No, I understand.
Right.
Thank you. You're all going to Dave's house, right?
Sure.
Yeah, give me stuff to read.
For number 2, I'm assuming that's for one student to go to Bloomfield, is that where the school is located?
That's a special ed school, isn't it? I'm not sure where that school is. Did you look it up? Is it in Bloomfield?
Yeah, I just happened to,
Could be in Bloomfield. It's not a new thing, it's some.
or is it Morristown?
Could be. This is not a new place, this is just
Okay,
occurring.
that's a recurring one. It almost equates to like $700 a day. Is it a special transport, like a vehicle?
Educational services transport time.
It's the tuition.
That's a tuition, not just the transportation.
Oh, okay, forgive me, I thought, okay, tuition and, okay. I saw ESD and I thought that was the.
Well, they do both.
Oh, yeah, they do more than just.
Okay.
And their own schools. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot for tuition. Yeah, it's a lot. Okay. 2 things to just point out. Number 1, number 3, we continue to have to outsource 3 bus routes just based upon the lack of bus drivers. As much as I think no one up here would want to do that, just we don't have an option. We do have the buses available, so hopefully we can continue to find additional bus drivers to fill those buses and not have to expend that additional cost. But we as well as Mr. Capello forwarded, I think, an article, there's definitely a state and national shortage of bus drivers. So, and then second point is just thanks again to the Denville Municipal Alliance for the donation of $2,000. Continue to, and obviously the Lakeview PTA for their significant donations also. So it was great to appreciate Steve putting the donations on here, and actually I apologize too, Mr. Jack Keats Foundation for the donation to Riverview.
Is the donation from the Denville Municipal Alliance, is it specific or is it just general?
No, it's specific for a program we're gonna offer,
Oh.
like on social emotional, Valley View.
One of them is the second screening, the next stage of screenagers that we showed. There's a new one out this year, and so we're contracted to do one of those. Another presentation I'm working on is on vaping, so it's kind of under this category, but that's what we're doing. The one we definitely already have in January, we do the screenager one, and then,
Any other questions, comments? None, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Lord?
Yes, no on 4.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, abstain on check number 7882, out of abundance of caution. It may involve products that may be cells, but all abstain. Mrs. Wagner, we might move with our operations.
Sure, if there are no objections, I would like to A, under buildings and grounds, board approve the submission of Riverview Elementary School electrical panel project as noted to the New Jersey Department of Education for
Second.
Is there any further discussion since our committee meeting about whether this is required and whether or not?
Replace the panels.
No, I'm talking about specifically the Board of, the Department of Education's approval.
So, we, in our town, when we pull permits, they require the Department of Ed approval. Now, the Department of Ed does not require approval for things like this. So I had a good conversation with our building department the other day, and gave them some literature that shows basically the law. We're waiting to hear back, that was satisfactory. But we did say, because this one was already in the queue, we're going to continue to finish it. So, good thing is the Marist learned how to do it, and we didn't have to pay anybody to actually do the submission. So she did the submission. Part of the submission requires that the board approve it. This is a project that we actually started, we had to put on hold. because
Yeah.
we couldn't get the permits.
Yeah, and that's what I asked, and, I appreciate having the conversation so that maybe we don't have to do this.
Because it slows it down and it costs money. So just so you know, that the state considers two different things. Anything that's either maintenance, required maintenance, or repairs, you don't typically need DOE approval. If you're changing something or adding something different, like, for example, the new HVAC at Valley View, that would require that. But to replace the HVAC, if it broke, it would not require it.
Is this part of the electrical study, or is
Now, this is the thing, remember we found that we had seven fuse panels that still had the screw and fuses?
Yep.
We're getting close to it, because you guys get ready to do the other stuff too.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Lord?
Yes.
Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Mrs. Wagner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gould?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes. All right, good of the cause, we will combine committee reports, correspondence, discussion items, we discussed enrollment and space quite a bit tonight. Whatever highlights, if you have anything, send it over to me. But any other good of the cause items?
I had a pretty excellent couple of quick excerpts. We have bigger fish for our bigger pond.
And we talked about this before at the Finance Committee. We spent a little bit of time discussing the transportation services expense because there's almost 25% difference between the projected and actual expenses. And it was due to the outsourced routes that were on the agenda. So, this is becoming a more serious problem. And, the solutions we discussed before, not a lot of great options out there, but you take a look at the economy right now, the difficulty we've had in retaining bus drivers and getting new bus drivers.
regional district, North Falls Regional District, has a ad in the newspaper. I've seen the Daily Record, Gino sent around too, so it's very competitive out there. So this could get to the point where we're going to have less and less money for other expenditures because we have to outsource bus routes. So it's a, I see it as a big financial problem. And I attended the MAC committee. They were supposed to send me a handout. I had to follow up with them. They never did, but they're going to be doing a survey to get input from the community regarding substance abuse with teenagers. And I finally got it today. I'm going to send it to all the board members and other people I know that would have more knowledge than I would on, underage alcohol use. My grandkids are in 6th grade and 7th grade now, so unfortunately, the problem hasn't really hit their age group yet. And my kids are adults now, so, but the initial survey they did, substance abuse amongst teenagers was a big deal in the community, so prescription medication, marijuana use, tobacco use, etc. So there's a survey I'll send around, but I think some of the educators I know at the middle school, also at the high school, would provide a lot of good information for the survey, compared to just me filling it out based on my frames of reference. That's all I have.
Yes. I did actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I saw that in your minutes, and I was going to ask the question, which line item is that 25% increase? Because I would presume that when I look at the cost, those costs, it's about $150,000 to $160,000. When you look at the ones, it looks like each route was about 50 to 55,000, or 54 to 56, right? Okay. So, how much does it, each bus, the fact that we're short 3 bus drivers, that's got to be a salary savings. The fact that we're not putting those buses on the road is a little bit of a maintenance and a fuel savings. We must be looking at one line item, a difference, but we must be saving somewhere on the other line items. Listen, I'm not a fan of outsourcing the bus route, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm not sure how we got that 25% increase.
So they're different pools of money. This is services, the other one's salaries.
Yeah.
So you'd have to look at the salary lines and the services.
You'd have to look at the total cost of transportation instead of, because I think we're looking at one bucket.
And that's
Sure,
it.
and the total cost of transportation is not just the salary components.
Yep.
The cost of the salary is insurance, fuels.
Yeah.
maintenance, and there's a whole bunch of other expenses that compose transportation expense.
Remember a while ago, you did we figured out how much it costs for each route. Like, what does it cost internally? So in other words, if we spend $56,000, what are we actually not spending?
Yep.
So it's $56,000, maybe we have $20,000 in salary, we have $5,000 in wear and tear of the bus. There's actually a formula on it.
Yes, I do have a total program, but the only thing that we're saving right now is a little bit of salary from those drivers that are going with
Yeah.
the district.
There's no doubt in my mind that we're spending more. I don't think we're spending 25% more on our total transportation costs. Because that would mean that our budget for transportation is $600,000. It's way more than that.
25% is a little high.
Yeah. It's probably one bucket. That's only my point is.
It could be one line item that we're looking at.
That's what I was gonna say, when we look at the sheet that Tamara prepared for us, that's kind of the way that it's divided.
Yeah.
Transportation is within its own
It's one
section.
line item that we get people.
See, I think the challenge is we're still paying for those buses even though
Well, and even worse,
We're
we're
selling
burning
it.
time.
We're burning it. We're saving.
Well, we're burning time on that bus, right? Because
Yes,
it's-
absolutely.
It's not a minor.
years,
It's
we are years.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not advocating that we outsource more routes or anything. All I'm saying is, I just want to put a relative term on, our total transportation cost didn't go up 25% by outsourcing 3 bus routes. That's all I'm saying.
And that was from the salary line.
Yeah, yeah. May have gone up 10% or something like that, which I'm not even sure if it's even that much, but somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
Not the overall transportation
Yeah.
expense.
Yeah.
I bet you it's about half. If it's 56,000, you took away all the other stuff, it's probably 25,000. So maybe it's 30,000, difference of increase of 30,000, not We did that once before, you gave us that,
Yeah, I mean, our maintenance cost should be going down a little bit, our fuel cost should be going down a little bit, because obviously that $56,000 is a bus, the labor, you know, the maintenance on it, the driver, yeah, all that stuff. Now, Dino's absolutely right, that we've got a limited lifespan on that bus, so if it's sitting in a lot, it's costing us money sitting in a lot, so no doubt about that, I'm not, I just wanted to point out that I thought, when I saw it at first, I was like, 25%, holy cow, and I was thinking our entire transportation budget, but.
That's probably the salary line.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's gotta be a line item that's gotta be around 600 grand, and that can't be our entire.
Am I correct that we did not acquire any new buses this year because of our expected shortage of drivers?
That is correct.
Did we retire any buses?
Retired 2 buses.
In fact, there had been budgeted for 2 outsourced routes, correct? It's just the one additional that's new.
That is correct.
But this difference has gotta be last fiscal year, which we didn't budget for the outsourcing routes. We did it in this budget year.
18, 19, did not budget for outsourcing.
Yep, and we had to outsource.
We did.
So 18, 20, we got the double whammy because we bought buses and we didn't budget for outsourcing and we outsourced. So we have a little bit of a breakage on not buying the buses.
We had a cushion this year between the budget to outsources
Yeah.
and a little bit of range on the drivers on that.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, anything else to do with us?
I just want to highlight, Steve already mentioned in his report, but for anybody watching, the foundation golf outing is a week from today, and if you golf, that's wonderful, and experience it, and it's a great fundraiser, but it's also a great dinner, a turkey tray, and I know a number of us have been there, and it's a great time, so come out and support the foundation.
And their kickoff fundraiser is Thursday night at the second half.
Oh, and I attended the Lakeview Back to School Day as a parent, and it was a great back to school day, as the administration always does, and it was nice to see so many new improvements in the building, and the building's really great.
Yeah, I think it was good.
Saturday, I was at the school board legislative committee meeting down in Trenton. They gave us updates on legislative issues that have happened, and they also started to talk about the advocacy agenda for next year. I emailed you all the proposed agenda, sent it just before the meeting. If you can take a look at it, we're going to meet again in December to kind of finalize what that agenda is going to look like for 2020. So any thoughts you all have, just send it to me. A couple of points of note. There is apparently a state board of education has 13 members, and what is noteworthy that they want to point out is that this year the president of that board is a local school board member from Georgetown, New Jersey. That's noteworthy because up until now it's been 13 appointees from business and other places, and there hasn't been a national school board member on that organization. So that's a noteworthy thing, which is nice. Mallory's Law was passed in the Senate this summer unanimously in 3 days. From the school board's point of view, it's problematic. There are some things in there that certainly limit the ability of our administrators to evaluate and parse out, corrective measures for HIV cases. What it would do is it would provide the HIV coordinator, if you have a resource officer in the school, the resource officer would have to be an HIV coordinator. When you have an HIV case, it would have to be, everything would have to be run through the county superintendent. They would have to be involved. And then there would also be limitations on the kinds of corrective actions you can put in place that will have to be reviewed. So school boards is working in the assembly to try to address some of these issues. The assembly bill is still proceeding. They're hoping to be able to correct some of this because they think it's fairly strict on us if it passes the way the assembly has to. The 4% state reduction in state health premium seems to be on track to continue. That looks like it is going to happen at this point. There's also been several bills that have been introduced related around healthcare savings. They've all been kind of geared towards the path progress report, which was generated by the state last year, and trying to get cost savings and streamlining of processes. There are a few bills that are aimed at reducing public healthcare costs. They're talking about collapsing again the school public health plan and the public works plan. They used to be one. They were split apart because they thought that would be beneficial. They're now talking about bringing them back together. So that's one proposal. There's also something that's come out of the state level called Direct Zero, which is a plan. It's my understanding is it's a zero copay to cover staff, but there's also a much more limited network of providers. Yeah, so they're talking about expanding the use of that. They're also talking about limiting some of the benefit coverages to gold level of Obamacare, introducing a bronze level, an HMO. So there's a lot of things that have been happening that seem to come out of the path progress report. We've seen positive, but in terms of how many of them are going to make it to the finish line, they're not really sure yet. So all that's progressive. And also they're talking about making a change to this too, to allow districts that were negatively impacted by it to exceed the cap, something we've been talking about for a while. So if you don't think that's going to happen, we'll have to do elections. That's about it.
Thanks for going down and spending your day down there. I appreciate
I
it.
get a free breakfast out of it.
It's a long drive for a free breakfast.
I think it is interesting, and I appreciate you bringing back a bunch of these things. One thing that kind of, you mentioned that I know we've all been tracking pretty closely is the reduction in rates on the state health benefit plan. I'm excited and happy to see that, but I do want to make sure we understand that it's kind of like the state trying to normalize the funding formula. We can't get back all that money that when we, could do a 2% cap and you were at a 10 or 12 or 8% increase on your benefits. One blip in the radar where it came down, although I'm extremely thankful for it and happy, I think we need to make sure we understand that, still net, we are still burdened with a huge benefit increase over the longevity, and I hope they can continue this, although I'm skeptical if they can. Hopefully, as they kind of get together and look at some other ideas, it'll probably hopefully get better. But any conversation on that security?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I missed that. Yes, it was in my notes. So the upshot of that is that the DOE they haven't come out with any recommendations or anything about what that's going to really look like. So that even though the money that's approved, there's been nothing about how that's going to be rolled out or implemented. So yeah, at this point, until they do that, nothing's going to happen. Is what they want the takeaway for us was that. And there has been some discussion about if we exceed what the letter of that was saying. Remember, that was very specific things that a lot of districts said we well exceed what that looks like. Are we going to be able to kind of avoid having to do anything else? There's been a discussion about making sure that that's clear in the regulation point, but maybe we can talk about it.
Okay. Great. Any other items for the good of the cause? We move on to our final public comment section, 9:59 p.m. We'll open for any comments that you have before you come up. Seeing no one come up, I will close our final public comment section at 9:59 p.m. We do have a need for executive session, however, we will not be voting afterwards. So this is just Wagner trying to bring us to executive. It will be for negotiations and personnel of those.
Sure. So if there are no objections, I would like to move to continue an executive session in accordance with Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act for purposes of closed session to discuss negotiations and personnel.
Second.
Go, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? No. Any abstentions? No. We're in executive session at 10 p.m.
I'd like to move a 2-minute biological